Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here from Digital Leadership Associates. I'm also with me today. I'm really pleased to have Scott Brinker. Scott, I've been hoping for you to come on for ages, and I finally plucked up courage to ask you.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here.
You're welcome. Tell everybody where they can get hold of you, first of all.
Okay, so I run a blog called chiefmartech.com, but that's without an H at the end, ChiefMartec.com. And I'm also at Chief Martech on Twitter.
And you're the person behind the Martech 5000, aren't you? Which started off at
Yeah,
what?
that's my fault. Sorry about that.
But no, it's an interesting thing. So anyway, before I dive into that, tell me your story about how have you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I've largely been a software entrepreneur in the marketing space for most of my career. I'm currently actually the VP of platform ecosystem at a company called HubSpot. Before that, I was the co-founder and CTO of a marketing software company called Ion Interactive. So I've always been developing software and working with marketers and marketing technology. But in parallel to that, 10 years ago was when I started the Chief Martech blog, which was more of just my interest and my passion around how this interplay between marketing and technology was really changing the nature of marketing, and not just the discipline of marketing of what we do, but also even the way we manage marketing and the way we think strategically about marketing. And so that's taken on a bit of a life of its own. And in addition to the blog, we now have the Martech conference that we run a couple times every year. So I guess I eat, sleep, breathe marketing technology in one form or another. I need a new hobby.
So we're going to talk about the 5 disruptions to marketing as you see them, Scott. But before we get into that, I mean, this thing about the Martech 5000. I mean, I use it in examples in my presentations about how the marketing arena has got so complex. And this is one of the reasons why people have such difficulty making decisions. Probably our biggest competitor nowadays is no decision at all. And you've got I can't remember the figures. I think it started off 5 years ago. There was 125 products or something that called themselves Martech. When we spoke on the phone a week or so ago, you said there's now 7,000.
Yes.
And you've got people that are going, there's some people that are saying what you need is that you think about this strategically. It's all about a suite. It's an end-to-end. You need to have one thing from one vendor, that right through to one person saying, no. What you need to do is take a very tactical view. You can buy this for 1 year and then you can throw it away. And what happens at the end of it is the customer comes out completely confused.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is definitely a challenging time. It's, I say it's like the best of times and the worst of times for marketing. I mean, it's the best of times because let's face it, I mean, marketers are being given these incredible superpowers, marketing's ability to influence customer experience across, the entire customer journey. I mean, just amazing things. But yeah, at the same time, it's, all this disruption that's happening around us, all these different technologies. You never get a moment to rest on your laurels. You're constantly having to learn, like, okay, wow, what's the next thing that's changing marketing as I know it? And so, yeah, it's also a very challenging time. I have a lot of empathy for the struggle that marketers are going through to operate in this new environment.
Yeah, if people say to me, what's that one piece of advice? And the piece of advice always, you have to stay on top of this. So you have to constantly read, you have to constantly, throw yourself in the deep end. I went out, 18 months ago and bought an Amazon Echo, not because I particularly wanted one, because I needed to understand it. Mm-hmm. I'm constantly working with my partner about how we can embed it into our life. Again, really kind of trying to bump into things and just be, and really we use it for our shopping list. But it's really, we know that it's there and I've got to use it because if I don't, I fall behind.
Yep. Yeah, things move quickly in today's world. So yeah, best of times and worst of times.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about the 5 disruptions to marketing. So I'm really excited about this because you've given this. You are a thinker, Scott.
Thanks.
And we
I play one on TV. Yeah.
people that watch this regularly know that I actually prepare this and we have a conversation beforehand. So it's actually, we go into a lot of detail about what this should be. And I love this when you went through this about these 5 points. I mean, this is just fantastic. So I am really looking forward to it. So let's go through this. So number 1 was about the merger of marketing, sales, customer services, and just like everything is being connected.
Yeah. So sometimes people, there's one of the challenges with disruptions is they also tend to get a lot of hype around them. So, a lot of these things that we'll talk about, they include phrases that have been overhyped. And so in this, first disruption, to me, this is actually the essence of digital transformation. And if we separate out all the hype of digital transformation, essentially what that means to me is the business is now starting to operate as a cohesive whole around the idea of a digital customer experience. That from the very first touch points the customers have with us, all the way through the life cycle, them purchasing products or services, supporting them, engaging them, developing these loyalty relationships over time, that the entire business is now starting to operate as one digital unit to make that experience great. And that's incredibly challenging, right? Because, it's, exactly as you set it up. We used to have these different silos in the organization, marketing was in one, sales was in another, customer service was in another, and you'd have these handoffs from one to the other. If you were lucky, but it generally worked. But the thing is, this was in an environment where customers were willing to say, "Okay, I'm looking at marketing material now. Okay, now I'm talking to a salesperson. Okay, I bought." Of course, I'm just going to talk to the customer support rep when I can finally get them on the phone. But in today's world, right? I mean, customers just expect to go onto your website, engage with you at whatever stage they're at, find what they want. They might engage with some sort of chatbot, on your site. They might be reaching out to you through social media, and they don't care about the departmental structure of your organization. All they care about is that they can get what they need from you when they want it. And the expectations of customers that they can get that, is continuing to rise. And so this is where we really find ourselves, where organizations are having to rethink their technology, they're having to rethink their organizational structure, their management principles to say, how do we get sales and marketing and customer service and our product itself to all be interconnected to deliver on those expectations?
Yeah, I mean, we as a social only transformation company, we see that traditionally social was in marketing, or social was in customer service, or social was in HR, or social was in sales. And actually it's the hub of everything. Mm. And it's a way of actually bringing the organization together. And certainly what we see is organizations are being forced to actually bring sales and marketing together, because there has to be a reaction to the way that the dysfunction is taking place within the buying process. And I totally agree with you, which is that if I'm buying something, I don't care whether it's marketing or if it's sales. I just want to buy it. Yeah. If you want to hand me off to an SDR or whatever it is, I really don't care. I just want to do whatever I want to do. And I think that your marketing 7,000, it just kind of proves that we are. If you're kind of not thinking that now, you're falling behind.
Yep.
We have to have a program in place. Digital transformation isn't necessarily about system replacement or buying product before anybody thinks this is a product pitch. This is also about making sure that you've got your people and your process aligned, as well as having any tools behind that as well.
Yeah, it's totally about a new way of running business, about operating business, a very interconnected an agile way. And these are easy words to say, but they're challenging words to make that transition.
Yeah, the thing that we often find is that, we ask people, okay, so this is all very well. Well, what would you do on Monday when you run the contract? You're going to do some digital transformation. What do you do on Monday? And I think that's something that people quite often struggle with because we've never done it before. I've never been, until I went through a transformation at Oracle. I'd never been through a digital transformation before. And there's a lot of people that write about, we need to transform, but very few people are actually saying, so how do you do it? I think most people read these articles and go, no, I know we need to do that, but how do we do it? Brian Solis has a great quote, wasn't it? Where we tried to digitally transform, but we ended up in meetings.
Well said.
Which is something that I love, which is quite often the case. So anyway, and actually being a connected organization, I think is important. I mean, how many of us, we're on the train in the way to work, and we're using a mobile, and then we're investigating, and we've got a PC at work, so we're investigating on a laptop, and then we get home and we're on a Mac or something like that, and so there's all the different interfaces, and we're looking at different information. We then may phone up. I usually find phoning up easier because you can usually transact with somebody quicker by talking to them. But maybe that's because I'm because I'm over 50. But there's all these different interfaces, and trying to bring all that together. It's just a massive program and project.
Yep. Well, I guess this leads us very naturally into the second disruption.
It is.
So, I guess the second disruption, is exactly this idea that there's this explosion of all these new kinds of touch points and technologies. And now that they've moved into the cloud, the expectation for the business and increasingly for the customers themselves is that all these different pieces are actually going to be able to talk to each other. And so this is one of the things behind that explosion of the 7,000 marketing technologies is they don't have to live in silos. Part of the reason you can have all these different specialized tools out there is because so many of them now integrate with each other, or they use things. There's a whole class of tools called iPaaS, which stands for Integration Platform as a Service. Tools like Zapier or IFT or things like this that just actually let non-technical people, non-IT people, connect different cloud services and get them to exchange and share data together.
You can connect CRMs to accounting systems using
to a website, to social thing. Right? It's incredible. And so this is
you follow the process of IT. IT started off when you had separate systems on mainframes. Then what happened was you moved to sort of like Unix, and things started to integrate, though it cost you a lot of money if you wanted to integrate other things together, like CRM and like customer relationship and accounting systems. And then we've gone back to having lots of little pockets of things. And I think the scary thing for IT departments was that it was going to become disconnected. And I certainly, I was at a CMO event 18 months ago where a CMO put his hand up and he said, the thing that keeps me awake at night is how do we connect all of these systems that we're running? He said, I'm not bothered about all of that. It's about how do we connect and go back to having lots of silos. And I think the technology has taken care of it, hasn't it?
Well, I think it's in progress. This is just like digital transformation is something that's happening. It's not over. We're probably still in the early innings. I think it's the same thing with the integration of all these different cloud services. There's been enormous progress made that's unleashing all this innovation and all these new possibilities, but it's still early in this evolution, and so it's definitely not perfect. It's a long way to go.
But cloud has freed up so many organizations. Take up for ourselves. We're a 2-year-old startup. Everything that we do is in the cloud. We don't need an IT department. And our accounting system, our CRM system, even LinkedIn or Facebook are all in the cloud. And I wouldn't buy a system that required me to have a server under the desk and an IT person.
Yep.
And you know, that opportunity for organizations and the cost that we've been able to strip out because of cloud, obviously if you're in IT, maybe a little bit scary, but if you're an entrepreneur or you're a small business, or even big business, the opportunity that gives you is immense.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is. Well, this is why it's a disruption. It is changing the dynamics of business as we know it. And I find it's particularly empowering to smaller companies too. You know, they're able to do things that not only they couldn't do before, you know, but in some ways they're actually able to now to do it better and faster than many of their larger competitors, because a lot of their larger competitors are still wrestling with that transition, you know, from a certain amount of legacy IT and legacy infrastructure there.
Yes, I built a career on selling what would now be deemed as legacy IT, and a lot of those systems are still in place. And I know that they have difficulty in recruiting people because nobody wants to use the interface. The user interface, you know, they have they want to upgrade it. It costs them $1 million. You know, all of these things that you just don't get with cloud.
Yeah. All right. So that's the second disruption.
That's the second one.
This explosion. The third one is, to me, in some ways, the most interesting, where it's about a different kind of competition that businesses are facing.
Yes.
Like normally we think of competition as people doing the exact same thing we do.
Yes.
And we could think of that kind of competition as horizontal competition. And what I mean by horizontal is you could think of there being a channel between a business and its customers. And so horizontal competition is competitors generally doing the same thing we do. They're at the same level we're at, and they have to go through the same sort of channel to compete for reaching the same customers. But there's another kind of competition which exists inside that channel, that between the business and their customer, even in a digital world, there become all these other stakeholders, you know. So like in the context of, you know, digital marketing, we can think of, okay, well, there's, you know, the business, but then we very often have service providers, and then those service providers may be working with us on MarTech platforms or ad tech platforms. And then those things are interfacing to, like, you know, the internet giants like Google and Facebook that have all sorts of rules, you know, mediating what you can and can't do. But then even beyond that, you know, the actual client software that, you know, the end customer uses. I mean, they don't think about this consciously, but, you know, their choice of web browser, their choice of smartphone, their choice of things now like these voice assistants and whatnot, you know, this becomes a stage in that channel between the business and the customer. And what's interesting is every single one of those stages is in some very real sense competing with the other stages for who has the most control or influence or power in making that connection between the business and the customer. And so this is, you know, all these things we see now here with, you know, the walled gardens that people talk about with Facebook and Google. That's a great example of vertical competition. Or even now, some of these new things like, I mentioned the voice-enabled devices like, you know, Amazon Echo, right? This becomes an exclusive touch point that if you want to reach a customer who has an Amazon Echo in their living room, you basically are forced to play by Amazon's rules for how will you create an interface into that. And so I think marketers, increasingly, we don't want to just think about horizontal competitors, the classic competitors we've always thought we were struggling with. We also have to think pretty strategically about vertical competitors, like who are we doing business with in this channel and how much power are they wielding against us in how we reach our audience.
Yeah, Gary Vee said, I remember a number of years ago, he was talking at an event, he'd been doing some work with Budweiser, and he was talking about the competition, and he was sort of saying, he was naming beers. And they actually said, no, our competition is share of throat. So, you know, when someone goes to the refrigerator for a drink, they may reach for a water rather than a Budweiser, or they may reach for a dark Coke. So absolutely, there is, and you need to think outside the box. You know, he was talking also about how on a Saturday, you know, you may be competing with a restaurant, you may be competing with the Fate down the road or something else that's going on, not necessarily something that's obviously a competitor of yours. But absolutely, if you want to get access, we talked before about if you want to get access to consumers, traditionally you would have done something on Google, you may have done some brought some AdWords or something like that, or you did some content and you knew how to manipulate getting access to the consumers. Now there's Alexa, there's Google Home, there's this, and if Apple still sell their product, and there's so many different things that you need to think about. Facebook, all of those things have an impact, and I agree with you that there's so much vertical competition, and this was really, really interesting for me.
Yep. And so it's also very tied then to this fourth disruption that I call digital everything, which is, again, we can think of, having watched this explosion of digital in the marketing world and the world in general here over the past 20 years is, when it first started out, digital meant like, oh, well, that's the web, and then we had the web and we had email, and then it was web, email, and social, and then web, email, social, and mobile. And now, whether it's with these voice interfaces or IoT or interesting stuff with VR and AR, it's like all of a sudden you're getting this like multitude of new kinds of touch points. And so as a marketer, as a business, we can no longer think of digital in these very isolated touch point silos. We really do have to start to think about how do we connect the dots across all of these touch points, so that if, a customer is contacting us through Twitter or the chatbot on our website or email, or they pick up the phone or they walk into a store, like how do we connect the dots across that to deliver a great experience to people? This is a huge challenge, but it's also got so much incredible opportunity, for businesses to create really remarkable experiences that stand out from their competitors.
Yeah, we've been dealing with a Dutch bank, and what they've been deciding to do is that they will add things, but they will never take things away. Mm-hmm. Because they know that actually people like to be able, my mum, who's 80, will write letters or ring up. Whereas they've actually got some people that want to interact with the bank through Snapchat, so they've actually but they've not taken the letters and the phone away. And I think and what they're doing is that they generally work on a we'll add something in, see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll bin it. And there's very much an innovation culture. But yeah, you've got to have just about everything that that comes up, and it's digital everything. Totally agree with you.
Yep. And then the last,
so number 5.
Scott. Yep. Last disruption is, of course, we can't have a discussion about disruption without bringing up artificial intelligence. So, of course, number 5 is AI. And the main thing I try and bring home to people when they're thinking about AI, because definitely that's a phrase that if ever there was a buzzword of all buzzwords at this point, the hype around AI is just off the charts. But the reality is a lot of AI really comes down to relatively straightforward machine learning algorithms, that the only reason they're now finally starting to take off is because the cost of computing to be able to run these algorithms has gotten so cheap and so fast in the cloud. And we've got all this incredible data now that we're able to feed into these algorithms, that all of a sudden what used to be a very academic concept is now applicable across all these different kinds of things in marketing, from, scoring leads to, identifying customers who and their propensity to churn, to even simple things like, automatically deciding what is the best time to send a particular email to a particular, audience member. All these things now are being driven by these machine learning algorithms. And so the point I like to make to people is there's nothing really super special about most of these algorithms. Where things get really interesting is with the data you feed into these algorithms. And for a long time in marketing, we've always had data, but to be very frank, we haven't always taken very good care of that data. The data quality in marketing has usually been relatively poor. Because still, you could kind of just make up for it with just blasting, your message everywhere. How much did you really need to leverage that data? But now that we're using this data to feed it into these algorithms to give us recommendations, to in some cases even automatically execute certain marketing components for us, if we're feeding in bad data, that machine learning algorithm is going to give us the wrong results on the other side. And so I think there's this real revolution that's starting to happen. And it actually times very nicely with GDPR and some of these other things happening. There's this revolution happening where marketing is realizing we need to make sure our data is good. We need really good data care and data governance. And that's going to unlock so many possibilities, not just in AI, but, really across data-driven marketing in general.
Yeah, I was reading an article recently because I agree with you that AI and machine learning is you kind of envisage men or women in white coats with clipboards going around and stuff, and what I hadn't realized that you can buy these algorithms off the shelf. I want one of these. I want one of these, and as you say, it's now it's in the hands of the average person, that they can actually buy, machine learning algorithms off the shelf and write an app with it, and or build your business on it, and kind of why wouldn't you? Because what I'm amazed at is that the GDPR, obviously being in Europe, GDPR has actually been a big debate, and I think I'm a big believer in GDPR, and what it's going to do is it's actually going to make us grow up about people's data. And I had an interesting conversation with somebody on a webinar the other day, where I said, which parts of your mum's data are you happy to be published on the internet? Bank details or address, and I was told, well, it's not about that. It's like, well, yes, it is. Because we're now in a situation where there is so much data, we have to be mature about it.
Yeah,
and if you're going to hold people's data, you need to be A, responsible, and B, accountable.
Yeah.
But having the right data is also, as you're going back to your point, is what we need to have. And I agree with you. There's going to be an explosion on making sure that we have the right data.
Yep, and those things dovetail perfectly, right? Because now that we're becoming responsible and accountable, for this data, that actually forces us to put these mechanisms in place to make sure that, hey, if someone says, where's my data or what's the state of my data, we need to actually be able to answer that. And so, we're putting these good data governance mechanisms in place that will help us fulfill those expectations for consumers, for GDPR. But we'll also have the benefit that, the quality of our data will get a lot better. Being responsible about this is, I think, going to pay a lot of good dividends for everyone.
I think so. I think GDPR has finally got everybody to wake up that holding people's data. We've deleted our email database because we don't use it. So why do we hold it? It was a 30-second conversation I had with my co-founder saying, we don't use it. Why are we keeping it? We might need it one day. Let's just delete it. And if you don't need it, then why have you got it?
Yep.
And that's the conversation that I think that people, and the debate that people are starting to have about why have we got this? And then when they've sent out all these emails, they found that only 20% of the people have actually opted back in. Well, actually, you didn't have all of those emails, or those people weren't interested. It was actually only those people. But that means that they are really, really interested.
Yeah. No, it's a better thing.
And that's better, because actually what you had was quantity, but what you got here is now quality.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's the debate. I think that people are starting to come around. It's very difficult to let go of your email. If you've got 20,000 email database, and then suddenly you've got a 2,000 email database. I know that can be hard. It's kind of watching your child go off to school or something like that. but it's what you've got is those people are probably advocates.
Yep, it's this difference between vanity metrics and the metrics that actually drive your business. I mean, just having a large number for something always sounds better. And marketers have certainly been incented to create these very large email databases. But yeah, the subset of those contacts who are genuinely quality relationships that are going to drive the business. It's always been a subset of that. And I think being forced to really focus now on that subset is actually, a recalibration to reality that in general is going to be a really healthy thing for everyone.
So Scott, that's been really insightful. Should we go through those items again? So
all right.
5.
So there's digital transformation, which is about connecting all the different functions of your business into one digital experience.
Yes.
There's this explosion of all these cloud-based services, and now how businesses can increasingly connect them together in very flexible and creative ways. There's vertical competition, really understanding the channel in the digital world between you and your customer and the sources of influence and power there. Digital everything, which is the explosion of all these touch points that we now have for crafting digital experiences. And then last but not least, the evolution of artificial intelligence from something in science fiction to something actually in reality that really is driven first and foremost by our efforts to get really good data and have really good data governance.
Fantastic, Scott. That's been really insightful. I mean, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can you remind everybody where they can get hold of you again?
Sure. So my website is chiefmartech, without the H at the end, .com, and also at chiefmartech on Twitter.
Thank you, Scott. It's been really great having you on, and what an insightful and excellent talk today.
Oh, thanks, Tim. Really, really fun chatting with you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Scott.